All right, so I am very excited for this afternoon. We have a very special guest that I'm going to introduce in a second. Can you everyone see our special guest, or is it hard to see where you are? Okay, fabulous. Um, I like how Ginny asked the question and everyone responded yes at the beginning of the day. I'm curious if you would answer this question affirmatively. Is your day going well so far? Well, before we get into yes, is there anything anyone needs from this day? Before we all agree, is there anything anyone needs to create a safe space, to feel included, to feel like you're in the right place? If there's anything you need, this would be a great time to bring it up. All right, then, how are you doing today? Are you doing well? All right, yes it is. And I am doing well as well, because I am joined now, we are all joined, by a dear friend of mine in Reimagine's, Leon Ford, who is obviously not physically present, but is now present both on a poster and on Zoom. It was really fun, Leon, I see you here too, making a poster of you last night, and got to kind of sit looking at you last night, so we got to hang out then, and now we're hanging out here. Oh, you can't hear me? All right,
Yeah,
I see.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
All right, I got you. All right, let's dial in this audio. So maybe I do this. This is better, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, so I figured out this setup. I went to Best Buy, which is liquidating, and they sold me this $30 karaoke machine, and now we are making this happen. So I'm really grateful that this is coming together. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon is how do we go through the hard parts of life? We really talked in some ways about the big questions, but what about where we go from there? How do we turn grief and loss and mortality into action? How do we process it and move forward in our lives? What does that take? What are some frameworks that we might apply to our own life when we face something like any of the things that are coming up today? Our mortality, the big deaths in our lives, and also the small deaths. As we are experiencing, our lives are culminating right now, and now there's a death, and now there's another death, and there's another death each moment, but there's also a new moment born. And so we're going to talk about that cycle and how to move through that together with Leon, really with the frame that death can teach us a lot about life itself. And so with that, Leon, I want to welcome you in Pittsburgh. Let's see how you're doing today. Are you able to, let's just get your audio sorted and you want to say what's up to everyone?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right, can we turn them down a little bit? All right. If you're watching online, this is Leon. And Leon, so, I know you're not with us today in person. And I want to, I don't want there to be elephants in the room, but at the same time, I feel like if you want to share the answer to this question and weave in however you want your experience that you're going through right now today and how that all relates, how has death brought you where you are right now?
Yes, that's a great question. I will say that my first experience with death was when I was 5 years old. My older cousin Darnell, he was actually shot and killed. And I remember going to his funeral. As I sat in the pew next to as I sat in the pew, my grandmother and my aunt, I remember passing them tissue. And I was so confident that I was not going to cry. And I can remember vividly my uncle, who had actually lost his son, he was greeting everyone and like he was smiling. And I thought to myself, wow, he just lost his son. Everyone's crying, but he's just like trying his best to stay composed. After the funeral, I remember running up to my father and I said, Dad, guess what? I didn't cry. That's the first time I remember kind of suppressing my feelings. Fast forward, when I was 11 years old, my best friend Steve was killed. He was 13 years old. He was an innocent bystander and was also shot. That was the first time that I considered that, wow, I could die too. Because before then, my experience with death was more like older. My cousin was older, and so Steve was the first person that was around my age that lost his life. Uh, 2 years after Steve was killed, my baby sister was hit by a truck and she was killed. I was 13 years old, and her name was Liana, and she was 10 years old. And although we were 3 years apart, we were basically like twins. We grew up together. And so, after that, I mean, I lost, once I got into high school, I lost several friends to gun violence. I lost my grandmother, three aunts passed away. And so I was no stranger to death. On November 11th, 2012, I faced my own personal, adversity and, near death experience when I was shot 5 times by a Pittsburgh police officer. And I remember, after they shot me, they had pulled me out of the vehicle, handcuffed me, threw me face down on the ground, handcuffed me. And I remember, just wondering if I was going to die. And I thought about the many different people that I had lost. And I was just, thinking about what they may have experienced when they were faced with death. Fortunately, I survived. And as I thought about loss, reflected about loss, it made me think about how fragile life is. Being so young, experiencing death, losing, my sister and other friends, I realized that, you know, we can't plan. It's hard to plan that like loss. It's hard to, even give advice, about loss because it hits us, all so differently. It's very unexpected, and it lasts forever. I mean, I still grieve the loss of my baby sister and friends and my cousins. Well, that brings us to where I am today. I think I believe my experience with loss has made me much more grateful for life. And even in those moments of adversity, I'm able to lean into gratitude. Um, I do smile a lot, and I believe a lot of people share that about me, right? They say, "Oh, you're always smiling and you're always happy." Well, the reality is, I'm a human being and I have a full range of emotions. You know, uh, today I was feeling a little confused, disappointed, frustrated, a little angry because and also embarrassed. I would say that because was supposed to be there with you all today, and I found out yesterday that I had to go to court, family court, for I'm being sued for child support, and I'm going through a custody battle, which is very frustrating. And so I'm embarrassed that I couldn't make it there today because I like to uh, keep my word. I really, um, I really, you know, it really means a lot to me to say what I'm going to do. And it's very interesting that this thought just came up. When I was 14, I had an uncle named Jimmy. And my uncle Jimmy was a bodybuilder, like way back in the day, and he was an old man when he passed away. Um, but he was always fit, even as he aged. And I remember when I was 14, he had called me and he said, "Leon, I really want to see you. I'm sick, and I would love to see you." And I said, "Yo, Uncle Jimmy, I'm gonna come down there on Tuesday." And I never made it, and he died like that Friday. And so ever since then, I've always been the type of person to, like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. Um, Unfortunately, I had to take care of this this legal situation today, which went well. But I'm still, a little shaken up from that experience. Um, but yeah, that brings me to where I am today. And even though I'm very, like I said, frustrated and angry, and I have different feelings um, toward my son's mom about and the courts. Um, I know how fragile life is, right? And I know that, unfortunately, tomorrow's not promised. And so despite this experience today, um, I'm still grateful to be alive. I'm still grateful for my son. I still have gratitude, to my son's mom. And the thing is, um, the reality of life is that, there is loss in life, right? And we can have gratitude, and we can experience gratitude and loss at the same time, right? We don't have to um, be overwhelmed with one emotion. Life is very complex and complicated. Even when we think about loss, I'm sure, you know, everyone in the room could probably think about someone that they lost, whom they loved, and they may get sad, but they can simultaneously think about a memory and have joy and gratitude, um, and feel good knowing that they're holding on to these lived experiences.
Leon, thank you so much. Thank you for you are with us today, and you were already with us in our hearts earlier today when we collectively shared a breath for you, and we're wishing you well in what you were dealing with today. And please, I know I speak for everyone in this room that you shouldn't feel embarrassed on our behalf. I asked Leon if he was willing to, how he wanted to talk about this, if at all, because he couldn't be here with us. And Leon said that vulnerability is the best medicine, and the way that he's connects, and it was healing for him to think today, and what was hard to think about having this opportunity to speak about what he's going through and to talk about how he's transformed his experience through mortality, that having that in his mind, doing what he was doing today, was helpful and healing for you. Is that right, Leon? I don't want to speak for you, but
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, again, life is, just the ebbs and flows of life, right? And leaning into the flow. You don't know where it's going to take you, but you can, lean in with gratitude, hope, faith, and community, right? I think community is very important uh, when you think about resilience, right? And I'm very grateful to be in community with you all.
thank you, Leon. And so, what we want to talk to Leon about today is this journey that you've been on subsequently, and some of the lessons that we're applying or we could apply that relate to your journey, and how we might all apply them to our lives. Why don't you share for a second just about where you were, and then just in a nutshell, just to set up kind of where you are right now, and then we can go back and walk through some of the steps that brought you to where you are. But just kind of, Leon's an incredible activist. He's changing the world literally, and through his work with police, and maybe you can just talk a little bit and the inspiration he's been bringing to the world around such a painful experience. So maybe just share kind of where you are now, and then we'll walk through, what it took to get here.
Yeah, so I think I heard you correctly. Where I am now, so June 2022, so a few months ago, I co-founded a foundation, and the chief of police is actually my co-founder, right? Um, Maybe 8 months ago, thank you. 8 months ago, and some people thought I was crazy for this, but I actually had lunch with the officer who shot me. And, one of the reasons why I decided to do that is because I recognized that there were a lot of people in community who could not view any officers as being good, or they didn't want to because they were being loyal to me. So they felt like if they let an officer close to them, or if they thought an officer was a good officer, that they were somehow not being loyal. On the other side, I realized that there were a lot of police officers who could not, in their heart, view me as a good person, because in their mind, in order for them to view me as a good person, they had to view their colleague as a bad person, right? And so after working with police officers for a few years, I came, I had this vision like, wow, I can really disrupt these perspectives by building a relationship with the officer who shot me. And it was interesting because during our meeting, he even said that there were people on his side who I knew were police officers who didn't want him to meet with me, right? But as we met, and I met different people within his circle, I was able to even build stronger relationships within the Pittsburgh Police Department, which is really helping with our community engagement plan. Also, because of now the foundation and the work that I'm doing with police officers, I have people from the community who are more engaged and being open-minded, and in terms of working with police officers. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I would say that I didn't start off there. In fact, it took years, almost 10 years, to get to where I am today. Actually, November 11th of this year, 2022, will mark 10 years since I was shot. And so to go back to me being shot, I remember waking up in the hospital, if you can imagine. Um, I'm in the ICU. I have tubes, down my throat. I'm hooked up to all types of machines, you know, multiple surgeries. I was shot once in my neck, uh, two times in my chest, once in my arm and once in my hip. And one of the bullets that went through my chest paralyzed me. And so my body right now, if I were to take off my shirt, it almost looks like almost like an autopsy. The way my body is cut up, I have marks all the way down my body, and so the one day I had no concept of time. I don't know how long I was in the ICU before the doctor came and spoke to me, but I remember the doctor says, we have good news and we have bad news. The good news is you're going to survive. The bad news is you'll never walk again. A few days later, or several naps later, again, I had no concept of time. I was still in the ICU. I was being arraigned from my hospital bed, and I was facing up to 20 years for several counts of reckless endangerment, resisting arrest, assault on police officers, all these different things. And so that was scary. Then I remember, attorneys coming to visit me, and they promised that they would get my family access to see me because my family, they weren't able to see me for, I think, over 2 weeks because I was under arrest. So I was dealing with all this at the same time. When my family came to see me, they left the phone there for me, and so I could type, what I wanted to say to them on the phone. Again, I had tubes down my throat. And I remember going online to just look at, what are people saying about me, about what happened, and I saw black teen shot by a white police officer. Up until that point, I never made it a race issue. I was just, fed this narrative. And on top of how the media framed the shooting, the worst thing I could have done, I began to read comments. And these comments, these were like the most, I have no words for how negative these comments were. Very racial comments about me, about my family. It was very nasty. And, I remember just saying to myself, like, wow, I don't just hate police officers, I hate all white people. I had so much anger in my heart. And then and I would go on YouTube and I would watch these like videos, and I was like fed this content that just fed the anger, fed the hatred. But then like my nurses were so amazing, and so I said to myself, why hate all white people but my nurse? And then my 6th grade teacher came to visit me, and her name is Miss Shank. Like, I love her dearly. When my sister passed away, she really like poured into me and like helped me keep my grades up and everything. And so I said, well, I hate all white people but Miss Shank. Then I realized like, oh, it's much more complicated than this, right? And then I have like relatives who are police officers. I would say, well, I hate all white people, but my teacher, and then like I hate all cops, but my relatives who are police officers, and then like I think it was my sister. She purchased me a book about mindfulness, and I would read those things. And that was like for years, it was like a dance, right? Between like this despair and hope. And honestly, I would say that the hope felt much better, right? And you know, I began to change the type of videos I would watch on social media. I decided to watch a lot of motivational videos. I made a commitment not to watch any police shootings, and I just wanted to do good, right? Being so close to despair, I realized how negative my thoughts were. I realized how I could either become a unifier or someone who was divisive. And my heart, like I always had a good heart. I always had a heart of a unifier. This tragic experience really hardened my heart for a short period of time, but I had to train myself out of that. I had to say, yo, this is not who I am. And I believe that I evolved, you know, into the person that I am. My grandfather always says, two lessons I learned from my grandfather, and you know, I'll wrap it up. One, my grandfather, you know, always talked about alchemy, and he said the fire is not going to burn you; it's going to burn what you are not, right? And the fire of my life being shot, you know, me coming through the fire, all that hatred, that wasn't who I was. You know, I was always a lover, and I came out of that fire as a lover. The other thing I learned from my grandfather is, I remember I was really depressed, and my grandfather said, "You're experiencing the lowest moment of your life. It's not going to get any worse. Can't get any worse than what it is now." And he said to me, "You cannot fall off the floor, you know, and you have to get up off the floor. And how high you decide to climb is up to you." And he said, "You have to let go of all of that negativity. You have to let go of all the hatred. It's weighing you down. So once you let go of all these different, you know, negative emotions, it's going to be easier for you to get up." And that's what I was able to do. I was able to let go of those negative, you know, emotions, to acknowledge, you know, those negative emotions, work through those triggers, and move forward. And in moving forward, that's how I become the man that I am today, who has the courage, the compassion, and the curiosity to not only start a foundation with the chief of police, but to also sit down and become friends with the officer who shot me.
Thank you, Leon, for sharing about your story and being so vulnerable and so loving in your heart with all of us today. So, folks here, you know, it's obviously we're talking about reimagining the end of life, and I think it is readily apparent why Leon's here, but just to make it explicit in the relationship that we have with Leon and the kind of work that we're doing together, and why this connection has really furthered this conversation on a bigger level. One, Leon's experience, I saw folks, as Leon kind of shared about your siblings and all the losses you were experiencing. You know, for a lot of folks who are Caucasian or from a certain class, you know, when we think about death and we think about old age, we think about what it's like to go out at the end of our life. But the reality is, for a lot of people in other communities and so much of the world, the kinds of experiences Leon was sharing, not, you know, all the loss surrounding yourself at an early age, that's commonplace. And so when we think about equity and justice, these are the things that we as an organization, as a country, and as a world, we need to be thinking about when we think about transforming the end of life space. Okay? Then there's this other piece that Leon and I are working so closely on together, which is, and I think you can see this, Leon is an incredible human being, and he's gotten to this really powerful place within himself in his own life, and now he's sharing that with the world. And the question is, how is that possible? How do we face the hardest parts of life and become someone like Leon. We all have our own, there's this expression, you can drown in an ocean and you can drown in 6 inches of water. We all have at least 6 inches of water that we've experienced in our life, or that we will experience, and many of us have our own oceans. So how do we go through that and come out stronger, with better relationships, a deeper sense of spirituality, a deeper sense of purpose in the world, more love and compassion in our hearts, more gratitude? So as an organization, we've kind of looked into why that happens for some people and not others. And there's a body of research out there around what's called post-traumatic growth. Now, this is this phenomenon that some people, after facing something hard, actually report some of the things that Leon's sharing, all those outcomes I just mentioned. But only, and it's a phenomenon, meaning that it happens naturally, right? Some people this happens for, and some people that doesn't. Research suggests perhaps less than 30% of people experience some kind of post-traumatic growth. The idea that after something hard, we become stronger or find new mental well-being. And I also want to highlight right now just something that Corey was mentioning earlier about resilience in this country. When we think about resilience, they found that resilience is actually a counter-determinative of post-traumatic growth. That the more resilient you are, the less you're likely to grow. And why is that? It's because if we're just focused on trying to get back to a baseline, it's actually a fool's errand. We can never really get back to where we were. But we can go somewhere different and somewhere new. And if you're open so a determinant of post-traumatic growth is your openness to new experiences. And so that's the direction that we could point to. What happens when, instead of trying to get back to where we were, we open ourselves up to the possibility of something different? And there's 3 real choices we have, and that Leon had. You can internalize that experience and just try to keep it inside your body. And we know that doesn't work because it eats us out from the inside and creates physical health symptoms. 2, we can externalize that pain, and we can externalize it in ways that harm one another. And we might suggest that externalization of our pain, as Leon was sharing, it could be a hatred for all white people. It could be a hatred of police. A lot of the pain and suffering in the world is created by externalizing our pain in ways that hurt others. And then there is a whole other pathway that's open to us, a whole other opportunity. We often think of therapy, for example, as one path, but that's just one option for what we can do to face what's hard. There's a whole suite of things, and I'm going to now talk and get Leon's reaction to, on page 16 of your booklets, we've shared this little chart about the virtuous cycle of post-traumatic growth. And I want to just name these different stages of post-traumatic growth for you. One is learning about the possibility of flourishing. Knowing that it's actually possible, that when you're facing something hard, this is not a sentence, which is hard to know. The second is building emotional regulation, mindfulness, awareness, being able to take walks. How do you regulate your mind? The third is being able to share your story in a safe space. Do you have a community that can receive your story? Can you share vulnerably what's happened with you? The fourth is developing new goals, a new narrative for yourself. Now that this has happened to me, what might still be possible? What are my big ambitions and dreams, and can I break those down into small, sweet steps for myself? And then finally, engaging in positive actions. Really, the research suggests actually that engaging in acts of service in the area of your trauma or your pain is one of the most surefire ways to experience post-traumatic growth. But the way that our culture thinks about service is very narrow. So when we think about service, we think about telling somebody you love them, making art, repairing a broken relationship, as well as all the other ways we think about service. So I just wanted to set that framework up. And what I want to say about that also is that we may still be angry in our bodies, but this is something that if people just live this, it is healing. if we did these things, we would find healing through the actions of those 5 steps. Now, that doesn't, I also want to just make one other caveat, that we still need room to grieve, still need room to process. You don't always have to move toward action. A healing action or a loving action can be doing nothing and giving yourself that healing space. So sometimes when people hear the term post-traumatic growth, there can be a resistance. It's like, how can this suffering lead to growth? It's not, how can there something good come out of so much horrible pain? So Leon, this is something that Leon and I have talked at length about, and we are doing work around together around how to create a platform that helps people find these resources and move in a community to create the conditions for post-traumatic growth. Now, Leon, I would love your reflection on just those 5 steps, and which of those steps, or maybe on the whole thing, and then if any particular ones are calling to you right now, or just how you hold this idea of these items, and maybe how those, if you had known about this at the time, how that might have transformed your experience.
Oh yeah. So I really wish I had these tools when I was in the hospital, because I was overwhelmed. I was confused. I was in an astronomical amount of pain mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And my response was directly connected to that pain. I wasn't able to see clearly how to tap into my personal strength. I wasn't fully receptive to relationships. I had a lot of love around me and people who were pouring into me. But in the beginning, I was more committed to being in that dark place, because honestly, I didn't want to live. I blamed God a lot. Why did you let me live? Why didn't I die? And so I was consumed by that. In the beginning, I didn't have a real appreciation for life, and I wasn't able to see the new possibilities. And so if I had the tools to help understand perspective, I think the common phrase that I'm sure we've all heard people say when they're talking about post-traumatic growth is either you could turn this pain into purpose, or something like that. This test could become a testimony. But what are the steps to get from the pain to the purpose? And then how can you turn the test into a testimony? It's easy to kind of go on through life, figure it out, a decade later, and to turn the test into a testimony. Now you have the testimony, you're looking back on all the different experiences that led you to have this testimony. But I believe this, this framework actually is more leaning toward the people who are actively, experiencing that trauma. They're working through it, and provides those tools and resources to help them get to the other side.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. Because facing something so hard without any resources to support yourself can be very challenging. And the way the post-traumatic growth often works is you discover these things on the way. But these are post-traumatic growth, if you look at the framework, these are ancient tools. I mean, these are things we already know intuitively when we talk about spirituality, for example, as we did earlier. It's really the same stuff, but codified in ways that can help us move forward. And when I've talked to Leon, he ended up learning about the possibility of flourishing. Leon has practices meditation and mindfulness. He shares his story in a safe space. He's developed new goals for his life, and he engages in service related to the pain that he suffered. That's a way that we can respond to mortality in general, because we all have to face these questions of loss. And so how do we deal with these traumas? And the word trauma also has a narrow definition in our culture, but we all have to face loss over and over and over again. We all have to face death, our own death. And so if we can start living in this way all the time, what death can teach us about life, we would have a different awareness of what death means. With that, I think I'd love to, where's Corey at? Is Corey here? Oh, I wanted to bring Corey back up. Is that a question for Corey about this as well?
Yeah. And can I say one thing, Brad?
Please, Leon.
One of the things that comes to my mind is kindness. And oftentimes we talk about kindness as in like being kind to other people. But I think, there's a lot of value in being kind to ourselves, right? And giving ourselves grace. When I think about how my traumatic experience hardened my heart for a few seasons of my life, that wasn't me, right? That was like a response to trauma. And I had to learn to give myself grace, because there was a point in time where I would never share publicly that I hated all police officers or all white people, right? Because it didn't feel like good, and I didn't feel good about myself when I had those feelings. However, I was able to come out of that, and I gave myself grace, and I didn't carry that guilt of trauma, right? And I think, even I used to, feel guilty about maybe I should have been with my baby sister when she passed away, or maybe, I could have did this thing differently. And, I think, those thoughts can really add to the grief and make the loss much harder. And so I just, want to bring it to this space and encourage us all to really be kind to ourselves and love on ourselves and be patient with ourselves. Sometimes I wake up and I look at my wheelchair and I'm pissed off, because I'm like, I wasn't born like this. You know what I mean? And somebody hurt me, and I'm angry at the police officer who shot me, and I'm angry at police, but then I'm able to feel it fully, go through, that process, meditate, pray, paint, read, listen to music, do whatever I need to do to kind of center myself again. And then I don't judge myself for having that thought or those thoughts. It's life. We're going to have thoughts. We're going to have feelings. We're going to see things in the news that may trigger us. We're going to watch a movie that may trigger us. We might have a conversation or smell something that reminds us of a painful experience that may trigger us, and that is okay. So just make space for yourself. I know, in service, we could be people pleasers a lot, and I think that it's just really important for us to make space for ourselves to fully be free and to go through this full range of emotions without judging ourselves and without feeling guilty.
Thanks, Leon. And we have Corey up here now with us. Thanks, Corey.
Hello, Leon. What's going on? There you are.
What's up?
So I wanted to invite Corey up and both of you here to talk about just broadening this conversation out a little bit about end of life and social justice. And when we think about death and dying in the medical setting and in our communities, just what are you seeing, both of you, around the attitudes towards this topic, around death and dying? Like, how does it maybe, for us who aren't privy to those same conversations that are happening in your communities? We were all just in Los Angeles together, the three of us last week,
Yeah.
in this neighborhood called Leimert Park, which is really the black cultural hub of LA, and we got together and met leaders from that community to talk about end of life, and I learned a ton. So,
Yeah.
Corey.
So Leon, I'll jump in real quick with this, and then want to hear your thoughts as it relates to communities that are dealing heavily with health disparities. One of the hospitals that I help to oversee in the Detroit area is it's a nice mix of all cultures. But the African American community many times feels left out as it relates to, and we especially saw this with COVID, with so many of the comorbidities. There were a lot of African Americans who were dying from COVID, and it just exposed us to gave us the insight that there is a population of people who are suffering from just good medical care. And COVID took advantage of that, so to speak, and really hit that community hard. And it was rough because when you know that there's a population of people who don't have or have not taken advantage of or don't have the access to everyday health care. They can't just jump in their cars and go to a doctor's appointment. They may have to catch 2 or 3 buses to actually do that, to make it to an appointment, or try to bring their kids along. And the difficulty that brings leaves people to just use the emergency system in medical care as their chief way of receiving medical care. And many times it's much too late. And so when it comes to death and dying, you see a community that has suffered so much from death and dying without the assistance or the help from other community members who may not look like them. And then, those community members will just show up at the time that you're dying, and they will reject you because of the fact that they're saying, well, you're not helping me to live, but you want to help me to die. And that can the attitude that people have. It's like, or you're just showing up now, but where were you when I needed you to help me to live better or to feel better about myself? And so I'm helping organizations who are not as active in the African American community to move their services more upstream. Even hospice services, I'm asking them to get involved in the lives of people to let them know that, hey, we care about you prior to you coming into our care. And it makes it much easier for people to begin to then access those great services that we have with hospice. If you're like sponsoring their child's little league teams or flag football teams, or doing education in the community, going to where people are as opposed to waiting for them to come to you. So this has been something that I've been really working hard on, not only from a local standpoint, but a national standpoint, to help both African Americans and non-African Americans to see the importance of partnering together. And there are great services that are being offered, and we cannot leave anyone behind as it relates to those services. But it's a trust issue. And much like Leon's story and what he had to deal with, I'm so glad that he and that officer were able to sit down to show the community that even when things happen that are unfavorable, we can bridge the gap and make a difference. And I want to really see that in healthcare and end-of-life care, so that people don't think that, the doctors or the nursing staff who doesn't look like them are just waiting for you to die. or to, as yeah, I'm a big proponent of gift of life. So to, we just want to come in and harvest your organs to help somebody else. So go ahead and, and die so that we can do this. That's the feeling of the community at times that is dealing with, those disparities. And these are things that we have to work to overcome.
Amazing, Corey. Leon, you got thoughts on this?
Yeah, one of the things that immediately came to my mind, especially hearing Corey um, wrap up, is I think about uh, relationships between police and community, and how a lot of times um, most of the engagement that residents within a particular community may have with the police is during a stressful or traumatic situation. It's very, similar to hospitals. I know, people should have regular checkups, but, a lot of times most people are going to, hospital or, experiences with the medical field is when there's some issue with their health. And in the police and community space that I'm working in mostly, um, I like to help the police and the community both humanize one another. um, One of the things that really uh, impacted my life is, obviously, I shared that I lost several friends to gun violence. But to hear how, from a police officer's perspective, how that has had a um, impact on their mental health it really changed me, because I always thought, well, this is your job, this is what you do. And there was a police officer that shared that when she drives through certain parts of the city where we may see a corner store or a restaurant, she's seeing a crime scene. And some of the crime, she's been an officer over 30 years, and so some of the crime scenes are over 30 years old. That still has a, impact on her mental health. And so I believe, even in the medical space, I think, there should be more innovative ways for us to humanize nurses, doctors, and anyone serving people within that field. Because oftentimes, I remember, when I was in a hospital, me getting frustrated with a nurse, right? Because maybe I wanted a ginger ale or some ice, and I'm like hitting the button, and she may have taken a little longer than I wanted her to. But maybe one of her coworkers called off, and instead of there being 4 people on the floor, there were 2. And now she's frustrated, or he's frustrated, and that changes what care may look like for me, right? But if we're able to humanize people, right, and if we're able to be a little bit more understanding, I think that also goes into post-traumatic growth, because I know, like, for me, there was a point in time where I expected everyone's life around me to change the way mine's changed, and that was an unrealistic expectation. And so I learned to be more understanding um, to people, and how they may view the world. And I try to humanize people as much as I can to figure out why they may be behaving the way they are. I do try, to hold people accountable, but accountability uh, doesn't negate the grace that you can extend to someone who may not be operating in the way that you think they should be operating.
And I also just want to add to that just real quickly. I think that there are three things that every patient wants us to know. I think there are three things that every human being wants and desires, and that's to be understood, to understand, and then to be heard. To be understood, to understand, and to be heard. To be understood comes from the fact that it's that humanization factor, right? When people are in our care, we see them in a gown. We see them stripped down from who they are. Everybody came in here dressed like they wanted to dress today. But in the hospital, you don't have that opportunity. And so all those individual qualities are taken away from you, and we give, a half a gown, and that's why when you turn around, they call it the ICU. That's a joke. But that's a joke. You'll get it later.
Yeah, I get it.
But I want to say that it's important for us to understand that this is a mother, father, sister, brother, grandmother, grandfather, friend, lover, whoever. These are qualities that our patients want us to know about them. Even our dying patients want us to know the things that they've done in life and accomplished in life. I was a lawyer for 30 years, and I would like for you to know that as a person who's caring for me. And that's important to them. So they want to be understood. They want to understand, which is the second thing, which means that all the hospitalese, I call it the hospital language that we use, they don't understand that. Family members don't understand that. When we talk about extubating someone, that means removal of the breathing tube, right? But it's extubation. People don't know. And so many times when I was serving as a chaplain, people would look at me and say, okay, they would nod their heads when the doctor would say, this is what we're going to do, we're going to extubate. And then they said, okay, all right. And then as soon as the doctor left, they say, what does that mean? And it's that fear of talking to the medical staff or questioning the medical staff. There's a fear there. And so, people want to understand what we're talking about. We need to simplify our language. And then they want to be heard. If there's some things that they want, they should be able to express those things. That's the humanization piece. And then we should be able to listen, which is, something that sometimes we all have trouble doing because we're already formulating our thoughts when someone else is talking. So we need to learn how to listen as human beings and just be in that space with that person. But those are three key things. I can't even talk now. But to be understood, to understand, and to be heard. If you accomplish those three things, I think that the humanization of those individuals will be felt, and that trust will be built as well.
And I think that also goes back to the conversation.
I think the hand up is here as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll make one comment, then I do want to open it up for some questions for Leon and for Corey. But that goes back to the conversation we had earlier about preparing for the end of life, and also the idea of finding a surrogate for yourself. Because sometimes, right, in terms of being understood, if you can't speak for yourself or advocate for yourself at the end of your life, you can't be understood. And so who is going to speak on your behalf? And that piece of the education to teach people about what a surrogate is and how advanced care planning works, we think about it as so logistical, but it's also relational, right? It's like who do you trust? Who do you love? Who can you have a real conversation with? Cultivating that in our culture and then helping codify that is part of the work that we can do to change this whole narrative about what happens at the end of life. So I just wanted to throw that piece in. And then
that surrogate, or that person who's speaking for you, may not be the person who you think of right now. It may not be the person that's closest to you in life. That may not be the best person to advocate for you when you cannot speak for yourself. So it's not always your husband or your wife or your close friend, because they may say, well, this is what I want to do. as opposed to what you would want. So I see some heads nodding, so I think there's some people who agree with that, right? Definitely.
Yeah, so let's take some questions.
This is Lisa, everybody.
All right, Leon, let's see if you can, if you can't, I'll repeat the question for you, Leon.
Leon.
Okay.
Leon, can you hear me? Leon?
I don't think he can hear because it's really coming through this, my phone. It's the magic box.
Get to carry Leon with you now.
Leon, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Beautiful. I'm very taken by the strength of your spirit and your generosity in being so open-handed. Leon, I'm wondering if it feels okay to you, if it's, by your judgment within the bounds, if you might offer a bit of your spiritual path through this journey, and if who you may call your higher power or God, if that's part of the journey here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I come from a very interesting family. My older brothers, half brothers, they were raised from their mom, a Jehovah's Witness. I have Muslims in my family. I have I have relatives who go to Pittsburgh Friends meeting. They're Quakers. I have, relatives who are Christian. I mean, it's like very complex. And my mom would always say when I was growing up, we would go to church sometimes. She would always say, it's not about the religion, it's about the relationship. And coupled with that, my grandfather would always say that he's the student of all religions, but he practices love. And so that's something that I adopted to my life. I say that I'm a student of all religions, but I practice love. I have joined my older brothers and their mom. I've been to the Kingdom Hall. I've been to Pittsburgh Friends meeting. I've been to mosque. I've been to synagogues. I just love to be inspired. I love to hear the different stories and the different practices of, relatives and friends. So I've not committed to one particular religion. I seem to find inspiration in what I've learned from the many different religions that I've been exposed to. And there's a through line that I really appreciate from what I've learned from these different religions. And the through line is love from my perspective. And that has just, been my philosophy. I do pray. And I meditate. So yeah, I think, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's, pretty much my spiritual journey, my path.
Did you have a question? Great. You have the
Oh, it's right there in the seat, microphone. Yeah.
here. Here? Maybe you want to, if you want to hold Leon in your hand here.
Yeah, everybody gets to hold Leon when they talk.
Hi.
Yeah.
I got you now.
Hello.
This is not so much,
It's good. You're good.
Yeah, you're good.
this is not so much in the form of a question, but I just wanted to let everybody know we recently released on the Holy Name website an instructional video on how to create an advance directive, how to select a healthcare proxy. It's a series of questions, explanations, definitions, and there's a section where you can actually select your choices or type them in, and then you can create your own video where your family and loved ones can see you permanently explaining why you've made the choices you've made, how deeply important this is to you, and why you've selected the healthcare proxy, who usually is not the closest relative or the closest, because you have to select someone who's capable of following your wishes. Yeah. There'll be kiosks at Villa Marie Claire, at Holy Name, but anyone can go on the Holy Name website and access the advance directive video and complete it for themselves. And then they'll be given a link to their permanent advance directive.
And that is absolutely awesome. And I do want to say that if you fall out with somebody that you selected, you can change. So that's a wonderful thing.
And we'll after this workshop, we're going to share a whole list of that. We'll add that one to make sure that's there as well. But we're going to share a list of resources for everybody here, including there's fun games you can play to help you figure. There's all kinds of creative ways in. We already talked about
the Hello
comedy.
Game, Death Deck, all those
exactly.
things.
So
yeah.
there's ways to help your family. You if you showed up today, you're somebody that's at this point, I think, open to some kind of conversation about this. But for those who aren't in your family, there's other, in your friend group and in your culture, in your community, there's other ways to bring people in ways that work for them. And that's really the important thing, is what's going to work for you and your community. Any other questions for Leon about any of these post-traumatic growth steps? Curious for anyone else if any of those steps in particular resonated, if anyone wants to share. When we talk about learning about the possibility of flourishing, building emotional regulation, being able to share your story in a safe space, developing a new narrative or goals, or engaging in acts of service in relation to pain. Anyone want to share? Yes. I think this is I'm so grateful you're here. This is the founder of the organization that we're all inspired to be at, Peggy Delaney. So here's Leon.
Hi, Leon. Let's
Hello.
see. Can he see me?
Yeah.
Where am I?
Oh.
There we go. Hi.
There you are.
Hey, nice to meet you. Okay.
Likewise.
So, hi, Lisa. What I'm amazed about and thrilled about is the similarity in that circle to the path that we at Synergos have created for what we call inner work, which hasn't to date focused on end of life, but it makes so much sense to me. And I wrote a paper called Finding Our Way, something like the journey from trauma to serving with love. And it's all about how everybody faces trauma at one time or another of their lives, and it impacts who they are and how they behave in the world. And through these retreats that we've organized both in Montana but in other parts of the world, it's exactly the same process, creating a safe container within which people feel safe enough to share their real experience, which I gather some of that happened here today. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you the whole day. And then move into a sense of validation for being authentic, and then a sense of belonging to this group who has heard their story and who you have heard their stories. And moving from there into a critical point, which is the distinction between feeling judgmental as a form of protection for ourselves to being curious. And that I find is one of the important change points, which of course we fluctuate on all the time, because we always resort back to judgment if we're scared or angry or whatever. And then the curiosity opening us to the creativity, which you also refer to here, creativity, imagination, and finally coming into this final spiral of this thing, and it's online. I think we can pass out where the paper is online at Synergos, is coming into gratitude and compassion and humility and connectedness and love. And that we find inevitably leads to a desire to serve with love. So it's just so wonderful to find that this is the cycle that you're finding possible after traumas and facing the end of life, because most of us don't think ahead to that. And if we can replicate that in the end of our life, that feels like worth everything. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Absolutely awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. If I can just dovetail on that for a moment, when you were talking and you spoke about awareness, right? Awareness of where you are. How many of you have been to, and I know it's, we didn't do a lot of this during COVID, but you've been to the mall before, right? You've been to the mall. And I tend to ask a lot of questions, and so, but you've been to the mall, and you wanted to go to a particular store, and they had that great tool there in the mall. You know what I'm talking about. They had that great tool in the mall that was an indicator of where you were, right? And it said, you are here. And I was sharing this with Leon. I mean, not Leon. I was sharing this with Brad. I probably should have shared it with Leon, but I shared it with Brad last night when we were talking. And you can't get to the place where you want to go. When we talk about post-traumatic growth, you can't get to that place where you want to go until you understand where you are. Then you can understand the path that you need to take. But we need to embrace where we are first and be aware of that. And then we can get to that place where we desire to go. So many of us want to get to that place of love, but we have not been aware of the anger that we currently possess, or the hatred, or the frustration. And until we are aware of where we are, we can't get to where we want to go. Otherwise, we'll be taking pathways that won't be beneficial or helpful to anybody, just trying to arrive at a place that you can never arrive at because you didn't start in the right place. And so I truly believe that that awareness that comes through meditation, that comes through your spiritual awareness or understanding of who you are, will help you to get to that place where you want to go. But embrace where you are. It's okay to be angry, upset, or to be grieving, but just know that that is the starting point to get you to where you need to be.
And what's so amazing about what you shared, I also feel, is that when you think about trauma and you think about death, it's amazing that out of something that is the most fearful, the scariest, the absolute worst part of life, there can be so much growth and love and transformation. And so it's just, there's a duality to that we don't often hold. And so what I think is so powerful about end of life as it relates to trauma is it's and I want to use these words loosely, but it is a trauma that we all share. It is it is the biggest trauma that we all face. It is the existential trauma that we all have to grapple with, that we are all suffering through. And what we've found at Reimagine, what's been so interesting through all these thousands of events we've hosted, is when people come in conversation with mortality, we found that some people leave and then they just go off and they've experienced this post-traumatic growth. They come in contact with mortality, and then they go into that spiral that you're talking about just naturally. But what if we collectively could create the support for everyone in our communities, not just to come in contact with mortality or trauma, but to figure out, like you're saying, how to turn those traumas that we all experience to come together across communities when we have folks from different backgrounds, bridging divides, and use these things that we all have in common to actually heal our planet and our world. So, Jeannie, speaking of healing our world, I just want to bring Jeannie back up here with us. And also, yeah, you take it where you want to go right now.
Okay. Well, first of all, what a treat to be sitting here with the three of you. What a gift, and all of you. I want to take us just for a few minutes on a little personal meditation to, in a sense, invite some of what Leon has so honestly shared with us today into our own bodies, our own experience. So just for a few minutes, and then I think what we're going to do is we're going to call up the rest of the folks who talked today and Anita to really talk about where we go from here. But for 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to get a pen and maybe turn to the back of your booklet. And for just a minute, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And then you can open them to write again. But for a minute, I want you to imagine that you are in a doctor's office. And your doctor is looking at you with that expression that you never want to see. And the doctor says, I'm very sorry, but it's terminal. There is a limited amount of time. And now I want you to open your eyes and write down 2 activities that you love, 2 people that you love, and 2 foods that you love. 2 activities, 2 people, and 2 foods. And then the doctor says, but there's some good news. We can do some surgery, and it will make you feel better. So you have the surgery, but unfortunately it messes up your GI system. So one of those foods that's your favorite is no longer available to you. So I want you to cross it off your list. And as the months go by, your body begins to really shut down. The end is coming. And really, all you want to do or be with is to be with the people closest to you. But one of your closest friends can't bear the agony of losing you. Maybe it's a relative, and that person really disappears from your life. So I'm going to ask you to cross one of your people off your list. And as you weaken, you really are no longer able to do anything. And really, you don't want any more food. So your activity and your food are now gone. And now you are at the point where your body has really, really come to a place of letting go. Your body doesn't need food at the end of life. It's actually not good for your body to take food at the end of life. So you no longer have your favorite food, and your senses begin to shut down. So your vision, your sense of touch, eventually even your hearing. We don't know. But the person you love, the last person on your list, is with you, but you don't know that they are there. And then you will take your last breath. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and take a deep breath. feel your body sitting in your chair, your feet on the floor. And remember that we are all here together, and that this was really an exercise about love and attachment. We love our lives. We don't want to give up anything. And it is that attachment which makes it so difficult for so many to have these conversations. So I invite you to open your eyes, and I'm going to tell you a quick story, and then we're going to move into our final conversation. I heard recently a wonderful story about a rainbow. When we see a rainbow, we invite a little kid to come outside and say, look, rainbow. And we look at the colors, and the kid is, really mesmerized by the whole thing. And then the rainbow kind of, how they start to fade. And the kid says, wait, it's going away. And we say, well, that's what rainbows do. They come, the conditions arise, they come, and then they fade away. And the kid says, oh, okay. And they go back to their thing. But we don't really know that rainbows come and go, that we come and go, and that we also disappear when the conditions are right for us to go. And so I say that because I think there is so much growth, there is so much possibility, as Brad said, as Peggy said, as Corey and Leon have shared so powerfully, in facing and embracing. But until we really get close to it, like, what is that favorite food that I can't eat anymore? Personally, I'm in a no nuts phase, and it's driving me nuts, so to speak. I really miss almonds. Like, it actually makes me cry. It's just a little tiny loss. A little one in the scheme of things. Leon said to me a few weeks ago, there were other things that he lost besides his ability to walk on the night he was shot. And I think if we each tune into whatever those small little losses are for ourselves, we can start to practice. We can start to practice living with the awareness of death. And that's really a gift, even though it makes me cry. So with that, I would love to invite Anita and Myra and Ben, and I think that's it, right? Anita and Myra and Ben. Thank you.
I just have to say that was just so beautifully spoken.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Well, come join us.
And then at one point, I'm going to have Lily come up. Wow.
Okay, so first of all, it takes a village, and this has been a beautiful village to work with over these last few weeks. I think that one of the questions that we've been thinking about is where do we go from here as individuals and as a culture? And I'd love to invite Peggy and Anita first, since we haven't really heard your voices a lot today, to to open that conversation with us and then to share it with all of you and to have you engage with those of us on the panel and with each other. We have some time, so we're not super pressed right now, but welcome to this full panel, and I'm going to pass this. Well, you have a mic. Peggy, you have a mic. Okay, so you want to start?
Well, is this on?
Yes.
Oh, good. So what comes to me after you invited me to reflect is that this session expanded my horizons by a lot, because most of what I think about is how to improve people's well-being during life. And yet so many of us have this fear, which I, at least until my brother died unexpectedly about 8 years ago, tried to push aside the fear that that could come any minute or at any time, or I could lose someone like that. And I have to say that I've been helped in this by several things, but one of them, which I don't know whether got raised here before today, is the exposure to psychedelics.
So we haven't talked about it, but it's very much on our mind for this part of the conversation, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, well, I've been hosting groups for about 15 years now, and although death is not necessarily the subject of the time we spend together, which is usually about 6 or 8 hours, and then the next morning some time to kind of integrate what we got out of the experience, that some of the images that appear, particularly from things like mushrooms, psilocybin, or ayahuasca, I mean, the images are so beautiful that it completely erased the fear I have of death. I'm still afraid of suffering and all of that. But I remember one time, this was very touching, I was with my siblings, and this is before my brother died. We were climbing up a ladder to the clouds, and one of my sisters was very hesitant and very afraid. And as I got up, I was a little bit ahead of her, and as I got up, I could see that actually the veil was so thin, it was like wisps of cloud. And I said to her, come on, it's not scary at all. It's quite beautiful. And that is without, any knowing in a logical sense that is possible. But it was so fundamental for me, and I'm so grateful to have had that experience both before my brother died and also before I've suffered a serious life-threatening illness, so that is there, that image of that possibility. And the other thing is that it's enabled me to connect with people who have already passed in a way that might be my own imagination, but it doesn't matter because it feels so real.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I just want to say, for me, it's interesting. Death itself, I'm actually not afraid of, and I've seen, for several reasons, I guess. I mean, I too have had sort of a similar thing, where I feel like I've lost 2 people I've been close to unexpectedly and shockingly, and I still feel like this very strong connection. And I feel like, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm kind of wired. I see when death itself, I see as like another wonderful journey ahead, and it's going to be a wonderful reunion. And I guess I feel very grateful that I truly believe that. Whether it's true or not, I truly believe that. But also, I feel like in my lifetime, through family members, I've also seen death to be a big release for people who had wonderful lives and were ready to go. And they, this was like this wonderful release for them. And I don't think, so I guess I did not see it as necessarily a bad thing. And with that in mind, since I am in a position to be involved in philanthropy, one of the areas that I find very, very scary and very heartbreaking is for people who are lucid, but they are diagnosed with some of these chronic, life-limiting diseases that can go on, and lots of times they're progressive, sometimes they're not. But the way our system is set up now, they also, in addition to going through losing a lot of their, whether it be muscular things, or in our case, it's Alzheimer's, you also lose that sense of control over your life, because you know this is not going to go away, your life is not going to go back to where you wanted it to be, but yet you have no control of your end-of-life options. You just have to just ride it on down to the ground. And that's just the way our legal system is set up. And so I think there's a loss of dignity with that, and that's really where my worries lie, because I've seen it with my own family members. And so there are two things. One is I've gotten involved, we're funding this program through, it's called Ariadne Labs, where right now there are very limited protocols for people, once you've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, and you're still lucid and you're there with your family. There's very limited protocols about like how to move forward with this. But then the other is I joined the board of a group called Final Exit Network, and Lily, if you want to say a few words about that, she's been involved with it for longer than I have. I wish we didn't have to have Final Exit Network, but the way things are set up now, it, just in a word, it lets people with certain medical conditions that are untreatable, it provides them with information on ways to hasten their death, and also it gives them like a bedside company as they go through it. And Lily, do you want to just say a few words? Yeah. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but.
So Final Exit Network is a nonprofit that grew out of the Hemlock Society, which I think more people are familiar with. And what we do is we educate qualified individuals on peaceful and practical ways for them to end their life on their own terms, and to provide a bedside presence with them while they do that. So these are people who don't qualify, or maybe do qualify for medical aid in dying, since that's only legal in 10 states now, and has such tight qualifications. So many people with so many conditions don't qualify for that. So this allows them to safely end their life in their own home, knowing that they, are supported in that decision. We also facilitate conversations with people's family and friends before they go through this process. So it creates truly more peace than grief, and gives these people a platform to talk about their suffering. Also, I think, Jeannie, you earlier mentioned the conveyor belt system, and this really gives people a release from that. It lets them drive the car again, it gives them autonomy over their own life and their own body and their power to choose in the way that many people who we qualify, many people who we educate don't end up ending their life. But they then go and continue treatment from a new perspective that they're not forced to do it. It is then their choice to continue life in their own way or not, and explain to their friends and family that it's their time to go and that's okay. So that's the Final Exit mission there.
I wonder if, Corey, if you want to respond to that, having lived at the bedside with so many folks, and then maybe we can open it up to other questions.
Well, first of all, that was empowering to hear and to know that is taking place. I think that, we need to give people who are dying the opportunity to, quote unquote, go out on their own terms.
And actually, can I just jump in? When you said to be understood, to understand, and to be heard, I mean,
Yes.
that totally qualifies. I think that
Yes.
that really ties into this.
Yeah, so, and I agree 100%. Thank you for bringing that up. And you know, I want to say that it's organizations like that, it's opportunities, let me say that, it's opportunities like that that we need to give people. People need to have options because so many times their voices are not heard, and we're just going on, you know, what others want for them instead of them being empowered to make those decisions. And I want to say just where do we go from here? Instantly I thought about a book that Dr. Martin Luther King wrote. It said, "Where do we go from here, chaos or community?" I want to amend that a little bit and say that, you know, where do we go from here is both chaos and community. It's the chaos that's going to lead to the community. It's the chaos of certain decisions that are made and certain conversations that need to take place that will ultimately lead us to a place of community and understanding as it relates to end of life and death. So I think that we need to prepare ourselves for the chaos, because this is a very uncomfortable conversation to have with people, but ultimately it will lead to community, and that is my hope and my desire, and I pray today that all of us will take what we've heard from this retreat today and make a difference, and I thank all of those who put it together.
In response, Peggy, to what you shared, some of you may know that there are a number of controlled studies around the country looking at the relationship of hallucinogenics to end-of-life anxiety, depression related to end-of-life, et cetera. In terms of where do we go from here, one place that we go from here is for those medications to become more readily available. I know a number of hospice and palliative care physicians who do not feel that they have the kind of access to those interventions that they would like to have. And so if that is something that happens to interest you, the kind of experience that you described, Peggy, is life-changing, is powerful, and I think is something that that we wish was available more generally.
I was just going to say, my sister, if you wanted.
Well, there is one, I'm just totally in agreement, but there also are resources even now, but there's a lot of misinformation and misuse around ketamine, which is a legal off-label substance and can be really helpful in palliative care. And there's a research study right now that's being undertaken with 7 sites around ketamine, and they're calling it conscious living, conscious dying. So that is a resource if it's used with understanding and training, which I think can be a big help right now.
I just want to share on this front around psychedelics and this experience that we're having today, is that a lot of what we're talking about, and what's so interesting that's coming up for me is, you know, we're talking about gun violence, we're talking about psychedelics, we're talking about police, we're talking about right to die, how we treat each other as human beings. So I'm going to say, I guess, 2 things. One is what we're trying to do today is create a gateway. And we believe that unless we can open up more spaces so we can walk through those spaces, and then you open up to all of these incredible transformational opportunities that we have in our culture. But and I think what we're thinking about a lot is, okay, there's bottom-up transformation and there's top-down transformation in the way culture works. And we really need to hit this from both angles. So how do we cultivate in our own communities more gateways to let people in to these conversations in ways that work for them? And then simultaneously, how do we work with policymakers in government to kind of help in healthcare systems? How do we connect those 2 dots? And if we kind of put pressure on the system in both of those directions, we can really open up a lot of transformation in our culture. Also, I want to just mention again this term integration, which is a term that I think is so powerful as it relates to psychedelics, but really about life itself and the experience of what's hard. Because a lot of this is like death. We know it's coming, we've experienced it, trauma. How do we integrate it into our life? Psychedelics is an incredible tool that we have, is becoming more accessible. But now even we're, as an organization, working with psychedelic organizations who understand that even that tool is an experience that we have, just like death is an experience. It's maybe, how long does it take to die? Maybe it's, I don't know how long death actually is. It's maybe a second. It's like when is that transition actually over? We have these moments in our lives that we need to integrate. And that process of integration can happen over a long period of time. So how do we support, if in a psychedelic experience, what we're trying to think about now is how do we support the experience of, how do we take that experience and integrate it into our life? How do we take death and integrate it into our life? What does it mean to channel an experience or to transform an experience, something that can have lasting benefit for our lives? And so we can take the lessons of those and live them forward in ways that bring out more love, and connection into our culture in an ongoing basis that might transform the whole world. So I don't know, I just want to highlight that word because we've been thinking a lot about what is the word. And in our mission statement, we talk about channeling, like how do we channel the hard parts of life or how do we transform them? But I also want to, this word integrate, we're trying to figure out there's some relationship that's happening that we can have more access to. If we give ourselves the space and set the conditions and provide the support for those type of experiences to be reimagined, if you will. So I'm curious if either of you want to share anything at this juncture. I know we're going to move into an experience in a couple of minutes, but I want to see if there's anything coming up for you about where we go from here. This is our comedian, Myra.
Okay, I'm just taking it all in because I have so many things to say. But Synergos has been an integral part of my development. And one of a very important program that Synergos is working on is called Bridging Leadership. So for me, I try to think about this as bridging our life with the afterlife. I'm also not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of not making the most of my life and the life of everybody around. So if we think about expanding that or just like tending that bridge in the physical as well as the spiritual and the mental way, that will, for me, will be. And psychedelics, I'm also a very big supporter. And in the meantime, we have crystals that can also help us with that physicality and that bridge between the two worlds. So happy to continue supporting on this journey.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm on acid right now. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think the integration is an important question in terms of moving on, but if you want, integration or channeling, I can say for me, the show that I'm doing now and the comedy that I do about loss and grief and death, I do it because I lost so many people and I experienced it all, and it's just part of my life. It's part of nearly every comedian's life and every performer's life and every writer's life in some way, shape, or form, and not every performer, writer, artist, whatever you want to call it, is necessarily going to integrate it into their work. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know if it's up for me or any of us to decide, but I can say from my own experience and in terms of moving forward, I think the hesitation to not broach the subject in conversation, to not face it, I'm very afraid of death still, and I am well versed in it, and I have held people's hands as they died. I have attempted suicide when I was young. It's like I've been there. I'm still very afraid of it, and I think it's reasonable to be, and most people are, but it's overcoming that fear and that initial in order to like broach the subject and entertain it and actually grapple with it. Whatever that winds up looking like, you can come out of it still being afraid, you can come out of it having no fear, or at least making a plan for the end of your life, or whatever it looks like. But the avoidance of it is what I think concerns me the most in general within our culture. And I think like all the bad stuff about that are surrounded with dying, whether it is access to dying with dignity, whether it is access to an affordable death, whatever it is, all of that probably stems from an unwillingness to approach, struggle through, and kind of work with the reality that we're all dying, everyone we love is dying, and it's just gonna happen, and it's the other side of the coin of life.
Amazing, Ben, and thank you.
Amazing.
It was
I love
amazing.
that.
It literally was amazing, because I'm going to just say why it's amazing before I go to Leon, which was also going to be amazing. But just that's why I think the comedy is so powerful for us. And what you said is if we, it's so easy not to face what's hard, but we wouldn't be talking about facing it if we didn't think it would enrich our lives. Like, why do it? Why talk about it if it wasn't, if it was better not to talk about it?
Right.
We shouldn't.
Right.
But what we're all advocating for is that there's a benefit to facing it.
Totally.
And so I think that's a really, I mean, in I think history and our culture, we're getting to a point where we're hopefully recognizing this more and more and making it more part of our consciousness. And with that, Mr. Leon Ford, I saw you come back on the screen, which I was excited about. Where do we go from here, Leon? Oh.
He's talking. Let's see.
1 second, Leon, sorry. We may have lost you in my little boombox from my $30 boombox. It's actually a karaoke machine, so after this, there we go. We're going to have a karaoke party.
Mic check.
There you are. All right, you're back.
Okay, now I can't hear you.
Oh, you got it. We got you. Take us home.
Okay. All right. Where do we go from here? When I think about loss, and I think about love, I think that's what life is about, right? Life, like there's loss in life, but there's also a lot of love. When I think about post-traumatic growth and how we can get from acknowledging loss or preparing for loss to finding peace in that journey, I think it's important for us to remain in community. I think it's important for us to share our stories and really embrace fellowship. This is the beginning, for some people of their journey to post-traumatic growth. Some people are in the midst of that process. Some people are further along in the journey. But at the end of the day, we are here with each other, for each other. My grandfather used to say, we're not here for ourselves or by ourselves, right? And that's the importance of community. And so where do we go from here? We continue to build community. We continue to share our stories. We continue to create space for ourselves and others within our community. And then, we embrace this journey of post-traumatic growth.
Thank you, Leon. Jeannie, should we move toward, I don't know what time it is, but should we move toward our conclusion?
I was just going to say, if there's any questions that folks have for anybody up here, we'd love to take just one or two questions, and then we're going to move into our close.
Are we going to talk about the next workshop?
Yes. So let's just see if there's any questions. Yes.
Is there any follow-up for people to be prepared legally for the time that they go, like a will or estate planning? Are you having a separate workshop for that?
Great question. Well, that leads really into Anita's point about the next workshop. So right now, there isn't the next planned workshop. We don't have the date yet, I believe. Do we? Okay, February 7th in Washington is really to explore this larger question. Do you want to say a couple words more?
Yeah, well, it's still a work in formation, and so we're welcoming everybody's feedback. But one of the things that we will be looking at in Washington is a lot of the current legislation around dying and death with dignity, right to die, those issues. So that's part of it. But having said that, though, and then I know the final one, we're going to be talking about medical directives, and my understanding is that at that point we'll be talking about wills and things like that. But that doesn't mean that we can't start the process earlier. And then for the I keep referring because it's going to be in New Jersey. Then for the third workshop, we could finalize those things. So, so to answer your question, maybe next time we can start that process in the next workshop and then finalize them in the third workshop.
And just to pick up on what the doctor shared earlier, we will share your resources, and there are many others that we'll add to our resource list of the kinds of organizations or sites where you can sort of get yourself organized. The one thing I want to say about that, which is just an addendum to what was said before, when you choose a healthcare agent or an alternative, it's not just choosing them. Corey, I don't know if this has happened to you, but I've worked, in a palliative care unit, and somebody will come in and say, "Oh, who's her agent?" Her nephew. Where is he? He doesn't even know he's her agent. That is not choosing an agent. Let me just be super clear. The entire point of choosing an agent is to have a conversation with that person. I once started advanced care planning with a woman when she was healthy. She was diagnosed with glioblastoma. Then we continued the conversation. Her sister said, "I would always have done what you asked me because I'm your sister, but now I understand why, and it will make it much easier for me." So whatever you are doing or considering, please remember the conversation is more important than any document. So that's what I want to say about that. And I think we'll talk about how to integrate this, because I think with the legal policy stuff, it makes sense to look at, what we need.
That's right, and there are organizations out there where you can also, you can find surrogates, people who are very familiar with the system, are social workers, and they can also, so I mean, there are a lot of options for finding the right surrogate. So yeah, I think next time would be the right time to do that.
Okay, I think we're going to move into our close, unless there are any final words from the panel. Okay, Myra, I know that you had shared the magic envelopes before. Does everyone have their little envelope? So do you want to open again, just remind people kind of what the invitation is?
Sure. So again, it's all about moving energy with intention. I hope that you've been thinking about your intention, or you've been guided in terms of what is it that you want to manifest, to write in your magic envelope. So this is the time to write it down. Remember, one is for you to place in a crystal, depending if you want to release something or you want to bring in something to your life. The black tourmaline is here to help us release. The citrine, the clear quartz, is help us to bring in. The other one is for you to take it home so that you can read it from time to time and see when it's manifested, or why is it taking some more time. Brad, so you're going to...
So you'll have 3 minutes. I'm going to play, give you some live musical accompaniment. This is, I talked earlier about my friend Sarah that I played music for at the bedside for a number of years. I'm going to just play a song called Tall Grass that I wrote during that time about post-traumatic growth, really, and what it means to move in a different direction when you through loss? No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. I don't want a big house, don't want a big car. I just want to go walking and talk to myself. No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. I don't want a big house, don't want a big car. If you want to come and check your bags at the door, or I will go alone. Mirror, mirror on the wall, life is not a fairy tale after all. Mirror, mirror, what you reflect is a life that's filled with too much regret, too much time wasting, accumulating. I am so tired of taking and taking. I'm throwing down, throwing down. Look, ma, no hands, I got my feet on the ground, and I'm flying. No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. Don't want a big house, don't want a big car. I just want to go walking and talk to myself. No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. I don't want a big house, I don't want a big car. If you want to come and check your bags at the door, or I will go alone. The queen don't look as good as she used to. The crown don't fit as good as it used to. I do not like all these things that I used to. I will go alone. I'd rather walk through the tall grass than sit on the highest throne. Clearer, clearer, don't need no crystal ball. Life is but a Ferris wheel, after all. Around and around and around we go. Stop the machine, I'm taking control. So back up, rewind to a better time, to a better place where we remembered faces and names, and we sat and we talked and we loved. Earth down below, stars up above, and we lived. No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. Don't want a big house, don't want a big car. I just want to go walking and talk to myself. No telephones, TVs, and VCRs. I don't want a big house, I don't want a big car. If you want to come and check your bags at the door, or I will go alone. The queen don't look as good as she used to. The crown don't fit as good as it used to. I do not like all these things that I used to. I will go alone. I'd rather walk through the tall grass than sit on the highest throne. I will go alone. 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 Yeah. I'd rather walk through the tall grass than sit on the highest throne.
Brad, that was just beautiful, and now I have a nice reverb also on the microphone. Thank you, that was gorgeous.